being in that position where you're uncomfortable, it's healing in that sense. So I think doing hard things makes you want to be a better person and appreciate the things when they're easy. So there's nothing that happens to me in life that I say, oh, I can't get through this. We think we have control, but we don't. So knowing that, understanding that, embracing that, I think is very transformative.
Welcome to the Hard Way podcast with Joe Sena, founder and CEO of Spartan Races. We're teaching you how to overcome your obstacles in your life the same way we teach our 10 million plus Spartans to overcome obstacles on the course, with insight from the smartest, most accomplished experts from every corner of the world. Get ready to elevate your life today.
Joe Sena here, CEO and founder of Spartan and host of the Hard Way podcast. I've got a buddy of mine, Tara Pipia, on. She's a professor, she's an author, she's a veteran, she's a coach, she's superhuman, just wrote an amazing book. Thank you for doing that book, by the way. It's going to help a lot of people. We'll talk about it. Where are you right now?
I'm in California, Redwood City. That's camper van. That's the style. That's the style in California. So that's where I am.
So you were in the military 2010, 2019?
Yes, correct. About 10 years.
How was it?
It was great. I enjoyed the experience. It afforded me the opportunity to go to school and get the PhD that then led into this book that you mentioned earlier. In addition to that, leadership skills, right? I'm a fitness guru, so plenty of that going on. Yeah, I would say it was one of the most impactful parts of my life. I've done a lot of different things along my 50 years here. And that was one of the greatest accomplishments, I'd say.
I love it. And thank you for your service. Every time I'm around the military, I get military envy. You know, well, it's just such a disciplined environment, right?
Yes, it is. It was very difficult getting out. And I got out obviously right before COVID. I was like, oh, man, I should have stayed in because the structure, the camaraderie. And then I found Spartan, which was sort of the new family that I found.
What would you say the hardest thing you ever did? Is the hardest thing you ever did, a decade in the military? Is it writing a book? Is it doing a Spartan race? Is it being a coach? Like, what's the hardest thing you've ever had to deal with?
That is a great question. There's parallels with difficulty in maybe different realms, but if I had to pick one like all around, I would say it was the deployment to Afghanistan. So the reason I say that, the book was hard mentally and sort of I had to go inward, and I'm a very social person, but I was responsible for a lot of people. So if I had to say that was probably the most difficult thing because that's always weighing on you. You take responsibility for your platoon, that no one gets hurt, and thankfully no one did. So I would say, and a lot of sacrifices, obviously, right? I was away from my family. My parents were worried about me. So going out every day and not knowing if I'd come back and that my parents would suffer if I didn't. That was probably the most difficult.
How'd you deal with it?
Well, I prayed a lot. And we would go on missions at night only, right? And it was one way in and one way out. So I would call my mom if I could and when I could. You couldn't say much of anything, but I would just tell myself, if it's my time, it's my time, and it's not up to me. So I was okay with dying, if that makes sense, and it made me want to live. So again, the hard part wasn't me dying, it was leaving my parents with that. So I promised when I came back I wouldn't do that again. So I kind of knew I was going to get out.
What's the lesson we could all take away from that? What would you say the lesson is? I mean, not just those 10 years in the military where you became, okay with faith, let's say, right? But the book, but everything. Like, what's the big lesson, the big takeaway from doing hard things?
Another good question. So I would say that concept of being willing to die and being okay with that, maybe not on your own timeline, someone else's timeline. Being okay with that's very difficult, which then I said makes you want to live. And if we compare it to Spartan racing and doing hard things like, say, the death race is extremely difficult on your span of Spartanness. Being in that position where you're uncomfortable, you don't know if you're going to make it out, and it brings out maybe the rotten parts of yourself you don't like or whatever. It's healing in that sense. So I think doing hard things, to answer your question, makes you want to be a better person and appreciate the things when they're easy. So there's nothing that happens to me in life that I say, oh, I can't get through this. I look at the pain and I transform it. So the same thing when you're on a course, say I'm using death race as an example because that's the most extreme and I've been avoiding it. And maybe I'm saying it out loud so one day I do it.
You're already signed up for 2025. I expect you there in June. You and all your friends. It's complimentary, no charge. You don't have to do the whole thing. I just want you out there to get the appetizer.
I don't believe that you won't make me do the whole thing, but I'll sign up. I'm down. I think that putting yourself in that position where you don't have control either. So that's another life lesson. We think we have control, but we don't. So knowing that, understanding that, embracing that, I think is very transformative.
I guess for me, it's the change in perspective, right? When you do something hard and you felt and tasted how difficult, how challenging, how you wanted to quit, you got to meet yourself. Then the next time you do something hard, you've got a measuring stick again. Like wait a minute, I've done this. I can get through what I'm dealing with now. Does that make sense?
It does. Absolutely. Yes.
What would you change? If you look back the last 20 years, what would you change?
Nothing. And I've been through a lot. So, the reason I say nothing is because it made me who I am today, and we might not be here right now. We go through things, emotional pain, physical pain, spiritual pain, whatever it might be, relationship pain. I would do it all over 100 times if it led me right here. And I think that's what people forget to do. They look at the pain and they sit in it. They stay there. It'd be like climbing a mountain for a Spartan and you sit down for a second. That's okay. You might be hurting, right? And your mountains are pretty high, the ones you pick. So say Vermont, for instance, and you're looking up, you're like, man, I just need to take a break. That's okay. Just don't stay there. And I think when people stay in their pain and they look back, like I said, oh, I regret whatever I did in the Army at this particular or whatever situation, I'm sitting back there instead of looking at that and saying, thank you for that pain and that growth to lead me to here. So I don't regret anything. I would do it all over again.
That's a luxury, by the way. Most people are wishing, they had a different life. So it's a luxury, I think, for you and I, for people that say I wouldn't change a thing. Where'd you grow up? Like, how'd you end up naturally tough?
New York. I didn't grow up in the city. My dad was from the Bronx and my mom was from Queens. And then they brought us upstate a little further to Middletown, New York. So I wouldn't say it was like the city roughness. So yeah, New York has a little bit of an edge. I'm in California now, very different. I've softened up a little bit, which may be a good or bad thing, depending on the scenario. But I think that made me tough. And I had a brother who was very tough. He pushed me in many ways. And, 5 years older, like wrestling with me. So I had to keep up with him. And he used to watch The Bionic Man. I don't know if you remember that show. Well, everything was like slow motion. So he would push me and be mad that I fell hard into the closet and would say, why didn't you fall in slow motion? I'm like, I can't. You're like 5 years older than me. So I'd focus really hard when he'd shove me and try to like slow it down. So like all those little things that he did with me, like, I don't know, I had no choice but to be strong. And I could have looked at it in a different way. My brother pushed me. No, I thank him. Thank you. So he made me tough.
I'm thinking throughout history, my history, of all the people I've met from Queens, I'm from Queens, from Brooklyn, from the Bronx. I can't think of a person that's just not wired the right way, getting after it, hustling, resilient. Is something about that time, that place really made some special people.
I can agree. My mom and dad, my dad passed, but both of them are certainly special and strong. And my mom is my greatest supporter. She used to say when I was younger, whatever you do, give it 110%, which I don't know if that's possible percentage wise, but I always kept that in the back of my head and she would never let me quit. If I played a season of softball and didn't like it halfway through, the rule was you have to finish the entire season. So guess what? I played all the way through college and beyond because of that. She wouldn't let me quit unless it was a good And I think you have a story. Were there like kids who wanted to leave the camp or something and walk off?
Yes. Kids come to me all the time during the death camp in the summer and they want to quit. And I'll pull out my phone and I'll say, hang on. I'll say, you're going to have to put in your quitting application. And I make believe there's an application and I ask them a bunch of questions. And then I tell them the quitter's office doesn't open until, 3 a.m. on Wednesday night. So now that we have your application, when the quitter's office opens up in 3 or 4 days, we'll present your case and we'll see if you're able to quit. And sure enough, before you know it, they get through the whole thing and it's over. Yeah, I love torturing kids. So tell me about the book.
Well, it started, my first Spartan was while I was in New York, tuxedo. And you also have a story when I interviewed you about a man you met in tuxedo. So that was my first intro to Spartan. And then I moved to California in 2018. And there's so many Spartans here. They're everywhere, like a stone's throw. So I really got into it. And then I noticed that a lot of the friends on the podium, now at the time I was doing Masters Elite, and then that went away, and then I went into age group, right? So a lot of my friends on the podium would share these stories about how, they were hooked on meth or heroin, cocaine, all the above, pulled themselves together, and now they're on a podium. So there was like one story and then another, and they're mainly men. When COVID hit, I couldn't be a coach anymore, right? The gym shut down, and Spartan, we couldn't do that either. That's when I used the military benefits to enroll in the PhD program, which is why I'm so grateful for the Army. I wouldn't have probably been able to afford that. So I knew immediately when I went in what I wanted to write about. So I told my favorite professor, I want to study if Spartan Race can help people in recovery from addiction. Not necessarily while they're in the throes of addiction, just drag them off the street and bring them to a Spartan race, or maybe that's possible. But I meant sobriety. So like you're sober like a month or two, put you into the community and see what it can do for you. So out of the dissertation, which was very boring, I don't even want to read it again. I said, this needs to be palatable to the public. So I shortened it to about 100 pages, put some pictures in it, did a few more interviews. You're among them. Jay Jackson also, and then Yancey and Robin Legat, and tied DECA into it. So the book, to answer your question more specifically, took the dissertation research, added some more interviews, added DECA, and I talk about the three things that Spartan brings out in people in recovery, which is a sense of accomplishment, the need for challenge, and number one, community. So when you leave a rehab center, typically they're like, bye, good luck. And then they come right back again because they go exactly where they were. There's no support. So my ultimate goal with this book is to bring Spartan exercises, programming, and DECA into rehab centers and correctional facilities as well. So when they come out, they have a bridge into the community instead of waiting an average of 2.5 years is from the men I interviewed. 2.5 years is too long. That's way too long. So relapse rate within 1 week of leaving is 66%. And up into the high 80% over a year's time. So if we can change that year, instead of people leaving and going right back home where the drugs are and the memories are, and instead embed them into gyms that welcome them, to me, that might not suit everyone, but it certainly would suit someone like me. I'm very intense, and so are these men that I interviewed. So it's not the whole solution, but I think it's one really good one.
No, I agree. Look, I've been doing this 25 years, and when I started it, I didn't think it was a life-changing tool like it is. I just thought we were putting on cool races and it felt nice and I think people would enjoy it. And then folks that were crossing finish lines all over the world are saying, hey, I'm back with my husband. I'm back with my wife. I lost 200 pounds. I gave up drinking. I gave up drugs. I didn't kill myself. And I'm like, oh my God, it's just barbed wire and a wall, but it's not. It's so much more, right? It's like you said, there's a community. There's a sense of purpose. There's a leveling up process. There's discipline and commitment that comes with signing up.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that a few times, get it on the calendar, right? I also did a survey of 274 people on various Facebook Spartan pages. And I heard those stories as well. Got me through a divorce or domestic violence, cancer scares, and all those things. So it's not just for recovery, it's for a lot of things. And having a date on the calendar is a commitment. So that's the first start. And the men in sobriety mentioned that, but the general public did not. I found that interesting. So I interviewed in depth 8 men in recovery, and they all said it was the accountability. But the general public, when they said Spartan changed their life, talked about the things you mentioned, and they mentioned fun a little bit more, where the men I interviewed mentioned accountability, pride, accomplishment, being a better person, because obviously they're recovering from maybe damage they caused to themselves and to family. So it was slightly different, but all transformative across the board for everyone.
So between the book, between your military experience, between all the ups and downs in life, what are some bite-sized recommendations to the audience on how to live an optimal life?
Number one, I would say don't give up. Whether you're on a course, I guess the course of life, or a Spartan course, don't give up. Number two, reach out to someone next to you, whoever that is, and I always compare it to a Spartan course because that's what I love to do, right? you're never alone. I might be struggling up that hill. I might sit for a second, but I'm not going to give up. And if I turn to the right and see you, that's more reason to keep going. So there's help available, and don't be afraid to be vulnerable to ask for help. And follow your bliss. That's what my father used to tell me. It's a Joseph Campbell quote. He didn't make it up, but he told me my entire life, Tara, follow your bliss. Do what you love. And then that's, you're the God's gift to the world, and what you give back is your gift to him or to the universe or whatever you want to label it. So I think when you find your purpose, you have a reason to live, to not give up, to reach out. So it all kind of circles together.
No doubt about it. Purpose definitely helps drag you through the mud when the going gets tough. How do people find you?
Mainly social media. So I do have a website, tarapipia.com. It's just a landing page with the book on it. But Tara Pipia on Facebook, and Spartan Decadog is my Instagram name. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not on there often either, of course, by my name. But yeah, or they can call me. I'll talk to anyone. Anyone who needs help, they can reach out.
Well, thanks for coming on. Thanks for writing the book. Thanks for helping folks that need help. Obviously, anybody out there that's struggling, just reach out to myself or Tara. We'll get you some complimentary entries. We'll introduce you to the community, and we will get you back on track, because that's what we do.